The streets of Vela Prime, the city of Vela Prime, never slept. It was a world of shining towers and endless lights, a place where trade ships landed every hour, bringing goods and voices from 100 alien races. The grand markets overflowed with color and noise, filled with perfumes of rare flowers, the clatter of metal coins, and the glowing signs of vendors who sold everything from machines to secrets. But beneath the beauty was a truth many ignored. Not everyone lived among the bright towers. In the dark alleys behind the markets, the poor gathered like shadows. They had no homes, no credits, and often no names. Among them was a young alien girl, small and thin, who survived from scraps and drops of mercy. Her skin carried the pale blue shade of her kind, but dirt and hunger had dimmed her glow. Her eyes, once bright, now held the heavy look of someone who had seen too much for her age. She wore clothes that were no more than torn cloth, pieces she had found in trash piles or taken from abandoned stalls. She had no family, no protector, and no future, at least none that she could see every morning. Before the sun crystals rose in the sky, she walked barefoot to the central streets. There she waited, watching the diplomats, traders, and rich citizens walk by. Sometimes she begged. Sometimes she searched the ground for food that had fallen from carts. Most of the time, no one even looked at her. She was invisible in a city where power and wealth mattered more than lives. Rumors followed her wherever she went. Some said she was cursed, abandoned because her family had broken old laws. Others claimed she was no one's child, a street ghost who had simply appeared one day. The truth was simpler: she was just unwanted. Yet in her silence, in her struggle, there was something unbroken. Even when her stomach twisted in pain, she refused to steal from the market tables. Even when others spat at her or kicked her away, she stood back up, her small hands clenched. The city guards laughed when they saw her. "Still alive, little rat?" one once said, pushing her away from the fountain. She did not reply. She never begged from the cruel, only from those who looked too busy to notice her hand. She knew begging brought shame, but hunger did not allow pride that evening. The city was more crowded than usual. News had spread that a human diplomat was walking through the central market. Humans were rare in this part of the galaxy, but their voices carried great weight. The girl stood on her toes, trying to see over the sea of bodies. A line of guards marched ahead, their silver armor shining under the neon lights. Behind them walked the human, tall and steady, his dark cloak flowing like a shadow. The girl had seen him once before, speaking in the High Council. She remembered how his voice was calm but firm, how he spoke of peace while others argued of profit. Now here he was, walking just meters away. The crowd parted to let him pass, some bowing, others whispering. To them he was power, a link to distant stars. To her he was simply another face who would not see her. But fate works in strange ways. As he walked, a sound rose above the market cries, a sharp clatter almost lost in the noise. Something had slipped from his cloak, falling to the ground without his notice. The girl's sharp eyes caught the glint at once. She pushed through the bodies, her heart racing, and looked down. It was a wallet, not the simple kind sold in the lower stalls, but a crafted case of dark leather, glowing with a faint seal of security. Even without opening it, she knew it held more than credits. Inside were codes, passes, and secrets, things worth more than she could ever imagine. She bent down and picked it up, her fingers shaking. The crowd around her did not notice, too busy cheering the passing diplomat. For a moment, time froze. The weight of the wallet in her hand was more than its size. Her stomach screamed at her. She could sell it, buy food for months, maybe escape the streets forever. Her mind whispered a dangerous truth. No one would know. No one would care. And yet another voice, faint but steady, rose inside her heart. It told her that this was not hers, that keeping it would make her just another thief in the shadows, that this was her chance to prove she was more. She looked at the diplomat, now walking farther away. The choice pressed on her like a storm. She could run into the alleys, vanish with her prize, or she could take the harder path. Her breath shook as she held the wallet close. Her eyes burned, not from hunger this time, but from the weight of decision. In the streets of Vela Prime, where no one believed a homeless girl could matter, she now held in her hands the power to change her fate. And though she did not yet know it, her choice tonight would echo across the galaxy. The lost wallet. The wallet felt heavy in her hands, heavier than anything she had ever carried. It was not just leather and code chips, it was power, wrapped in a single object. The street girl's heart pounded in her chest like a war drum. her breath unsteady as she looked at the shining seal on its surface. Every instinct in her body told her to run, to vanish into the maze of alleys where the guards would never bother chasing. She had survived all these years by knowing when to move and when to hide. Now, holding the diplomat's wallet, she could taste the kind of life she had only seen from far away. Food, safety, clothes, maybe even a small place to sleep without fear of the cold. It was all within her reach if she chose to keep it. But choices on Vela Prime always came with shadows. She had seen what happened to thieves dragged out into the streets by guards, their hands bound in chains. Sometimes they never returned, their bodies dumped in the lower canals as warnings to others. The girl was small, but she was not blind. She knew what the wallet meant. She stepped back into the shadows of the market stall, watching as the diplomat's tall figure moved farther away. The crowd adored him, unaware that the most important thing he carried was no longer with him. Her thin fingers clenched tighter, the seal glowing softly in the night. She could feel the eyes of the city on her, though no one was looking. Her mind began to whisper two different futures. In one, she ran, disappearing into the alleys, selling the wallet to black market traders. She would eat, she would live, but she would always be hunted, always be a thief. In the other, she returned it, faced the guards' anger, faced the mocking laughter of the powerful. But maybe, just maybe, she would walk away with something no credits could buy. She swallowed hard, the sound loud in her own ears. Her hunger screamed at her to choose the first path. Her heart pulled her toward the second. And though she did not yet understand why, she began to move step by step. She pushed through the crowd again. Her bare feet slapped against the stone streets, ignored by the people who brushed past her. Every step felt like fire, every breath a storm. The diplomat's guards walked like moving walls. Tall and unshakable, they carried weapons polished to silver, their armor reflecting the neon of the market lights. The girl approached slowly, clutching the wallet close to her chest. "Stop there," one of the guards barked, his voice hard as steel. She froze, her knees trembling. The guards looked her up and down, their faces filled with disgust at her torn clothes and dirt-covered skin. "Beggar, leave before you're dragged away," another spat, pushing her back with the edge of his spear. Her body shook, fear pressing down on her chest like a crushing weight. She wanted to run, to disappear, but her fingers refused to release the wallet. Her voice was small, but she forced it out. "I need to see him," she whispered. The guards laughed, their voices harsh in the crowded street. "You? See the diplomat? You stink of the gutters," one said, shaking his head. "Go before you find yourself locked in the drains." But she didn't move. Her arms wrapped around the wallet tighter, as if it were part of her. The guards stepped closer, their shadows swallowing her small frame. One reached to grab her shoulder, but she slipped past, her small size her only shield. The crowd gasped as she darted between the armored legs. In moments, she stood directly in front of the human diplomat, her tiny body blocking his path. Silence fell. The diplomat stopped, his sharp eyes narrowing as he looked down at her. The guards rushed forward, ready to drag her away, but the human lifted one hand, stopping them. The girl raised her arms, her hands trembling as she held out the wallet. The seal glowed faintly under the alien lights, proof of what it was. For a moment, the market was still. The human diplomat stared at her, confusion and surprise flickering across his face. He took the wallet carefully, his touch gentle as though he feared breaking it. The girl's knees nearly gave way as the weight left her hands. Her body shook with relief and fear all at once. The guards muttered in anger, whispering about punishment and crime. But the human's voice cut through the noise, calm and deep. "Where did you find this?" he asked, his gaze fixed on her. Her lips trembled, but she forced the words out. "It fell. You dropped it," she whispered, her voice almost lost in the night air. The diplomat studied her for a long moment. His eyes did not see her as the guards did, not as a beggar, not as a ghost of the streets. He saw something else, though she could not name it. The crowd leaned in, whispers spreading like fire. A homeless girl had returned what others would have stolen without a second thought. Her heart raced, her breath uneven. She thought of running again, of vanishing back into the alleys before the guards remembered their anger. But the diplomat did not shout, did not accuse. He simply held the wallet and looked at her with an expression she had never seen before. Not hatred, not pity, but something far more dangerous: recognition. The choice. The girl stood frozen in front of the human diplomat. Her chest rose and fell quickly, as though her small body could not hold the storm inside. The wallet was no longer in her hands, yet she felt its weight still pressing against her heart. Around her, the market was silent, hundreds of eyes fixed on the strange scene. The guards were restless, shifting uneasily, their hands on their weapons. They were ready to drag her away at the diplomat's command. To them, she was nothing more than a thief, a street rat who had dared to stand before power. Yet the diplomat had not spoken, not fully, not yet. He held the wallet in his hand, turning it slowly, as though testing its weight. The glow of the seal reflected in his eyes, sharp and steady. Then his gaze moved back to her, and she felt as if he were seeing through the dirt, the hunger, the broken clothes, as if he were seeing something else entirely. Her throat tightened, her voice almost breaking as she whispered again, It was never mine." The words slipped out like a secret she had kept buried. The crowd stirred, some scoffing, others murmuring with surprise. Why would a homeless girl admit such a thing? Why return what could have bought her escape? The diplomat's expression did not change, but his silence grew heavy. The girl's legs trembled, her fear returning. She knew she had risked everything by coming forward if he chose to believe she had stolen it. Her fate was sealed, but if he believed her words, then something else might happen, something she could not yet imagine. Her mind pulled her back to the alleys, to the endless hunger, the cold nights, the faces that turned away when she begged. She could still run even now. The guards had not yet bound her, the crowd was thick, and her small body could slip through cracks no soldier could follow. She could disappear into the city and pretend this moment had never happened. But another thought rose within her, soft and dangerous. What if this was her only chance to be seen? What if she turned away now and the shadows swallowed her forever? She had returned the wallet, yes, but what came after? Would he remember her face, or would she vanish again into the streets? The choice cut at her like a blade. Run and remain a ghost, safe but forgotten. Stay, and risk punishment, risk chains. But also risk something far greater. Hope. Her lips parted, her body shaking as she looked up at the diplomat. I could have kept it, she whispered, louder this time so the crowd could hear. I was hungry. But it was yours, not mine. Her words were not polished, not noble, just raw truth spilling from her soul. The guards exchanged confused glances. One sneered, "She's lying, all of them lie." Another growled, "Let me drag her out," but again, the diplomat raised his hand, stopping them. His eyes did not leave her face. He studied her as though she were a puzzle that did not fit the pieces he had always known. Finally, he asked in a low voice, "Do you know what this holds?" She shook her head quickly, her hair falling over her eyes. "No," she answered softly. "Only that it was not mine." The crowd stirred again, their whispers growing louder. Some scoffed. "A trick," others murmured. Maybe she speaks truth. And for the first time in her short life, the girl realized she had become the center of every voice in the street. Her words had cut through the noise of the marketplace like a blade of light. The diplomat turned the wallet once more, then slipped it inside his cloak. His expression remained unreadable, but his voice carried across the square. "You chose to return it," he said slowly, each word deliberate. "You chose honesty. Even when hunger pressed against you." Her heart raced. Her breath caught in her throat. Was he condemning her or praising her? She could not tell, but the silence of the crowd felt heavier than any chain. The city itself seemed to lean in, waiting for what came next. She lowered her head, her small body trembling. Her choice had been made, she had given it back now. She could only wait to see if it destroyed her or saved her. The diplomat's gaze lingered on her for another long moment. Then he spoke again, his voice softer this time, but carrying an edge of command. "Tell me your name." The girl froze, her name, something she had not spoken in years, something the streets had stolen from her. She opened her mouth, but the words caught in her throat. Her voice cracked as she whispered, I don't remember." A ripple of shock passed through the crowd. To live nameless was to be less than dust in Vela Prime. Even the guards, cruel as they were, shifted uncomfortably at her answer. The diplomat's expression darkened, not with anger, but with something else, pity. No, not pity, something heavier. Recognition again. For the first time, the girl realized that the true choice was not only hers. The diplomat now faced his own. Would he cast her aside as the city always had? Or would he decide that her act of honesty meant something more? In that fragile moment, the streets of Vela Prime held their breath. Two lives, one powerful and one forgotten, had collided. and the next decision would echo far beyond the shadows of the market. The confrontation. The market had never been this silent. Even the vendors, who usually shouted above the chaos, had stopped speaking. Hundreds of eyes locked on the strange sight before them. A homeless girl standing before a human diplomat, and the human, instead of striking her down, asking for her name, the guards grew restless, their armor clinking as they shifted. One of them finally stepped forward, anger sharp in his voice. "Enough of this," he barked. "She is a gutter child. A liar, a thief. She should be punished, not questioned." He reached for her arm, his heavy glove ready to drag her away like trash. But before he could touch her, the diplomat moved. He placed himself between the guard and the girl, his tall frame casting a long shadow over her small body. The guard froze, shocked by the human's sudden step. The crowd gasped, whispers rising like sparks from a fire. The diplomat's voice cut through the noise, calm but edged with steel. "Did she steal it?" he asked, his gaze fixed on the guard. The soldier hesitated, his jaw tightening. No, he admitted at last. "But she could have. She would have." "She did not," the diplomat interrupted, his tone firm. "She returned it when others would not have." The guard clenched his fists, anger clear on his face. "She is filth. She does not belong in your sight," he growled. But the diplomat's eyes hardened. "She has done what few among your kind would have dared, and you would punish her for it?" The guard fell silent, but his fury burned in his eyes. The crowd, however, stirred with new voices. Some shouted, "He is right." "She returned it," others spat. "She is nothing." Do not be fooled. The market was no longer quiet. It was alive, divided, ready to break into chaos. The girl trembled where she stood, caught between fear and awe. She had never imagined anyone, let alone a human diplomat, would stand in front of her as if she were worth protecting. Her heart raced so fast it hurt, her hands shaking at her sides. For once, the guard's cruelty was not the loudest voice in the square. The diplomat turned back to her, his face softer now. "You chose to return what was not yours," he said, his voice low enough that only she and the nearest could hear. "Do you understand what this means?" Her lips parted, but no words came. She only shook her head weakly, her eyes wide with confusion. He studied her for a long moment, then straightened, his cloak shifting as he faced the crowd. "This girl," he declared, his voice rising above the chaos, "did not take what was mine, she returned it, though hunger would have pushed her to do otherwise." His words echoed off the stone walls, silencing many of the murmurs. "She has shown honor where many would show greed." The crowd's reaction split in two. Some cheered, impressed by the girl's act. Others jeered, refusing to believe that a street child could be capable of such truth. The voices clashed like storm winds, filling the marketplace with a tension so sharp it felt like the air might crack. The guards shifted again, their anger boiling. One spat. "You cannot praise her, she is nothing but filth." "Your words shame us all," another added. "She should be whipped, to teach the others their place." The girl's body shrank at their words, fear returning to her chest like cold knives. But again the diplomat's hand rose, silencing his own soldiers. His gaze was unyielding, his tone colder now. "You see filth," he said. "I see courage, you see weakness. I see strength." His voice carried across the square, drawing every ear. "This city steps on those it calls worthless, and yet it is this girl who has proven she holds more dignity than many of its rulers." The words struck the crowd like lightning. Gasps and shouts mixed, some calling him wise, others daring to call him blind, but all eyes turned to the girl, who now stood shaking under the weight of the galaxy's gaze. She wanted to disappear, to hide, to crawl back into the alleys and escape the fire of so many stares. But her feet refused to move, her choice had already been made, and now she was caught in the storm that followed. The diplomat looked down at her again, his voice softer now. "You are not invisible," he said quietly, only for her to hear. Her eyes filled with tears she had not felt in years. For so long she had been nothing, unseen, unheard. And now, someone had spoken the truth she had buried in her own heart. The guards fumed, the crowd roared, the city itself seemed to hold its breath. What the diplomat would decide next would not only shape her fate, it would send a message across Vela Prime and perhaps beyond. The girl did not know if she had gained a savior or stepped into a fire greater than she could survive. But in that moment, one truth burned brighter than the neon lights above. Her life was no longer her own shadow. It had been pulled into the light and the galaxy was watching. The human's reaction, the weight of silence, returned. The market that had once roared with voices now waited, every ear straining for the human diplomat's next words. Even the lights above seemed dimmer, as though the city itself leaned closer to hear. The girl trembled, her thin frame hidden in the folds of shadow that the diplomat's cloak cast across her. Her eyes burned, her throat dry. She had done her part. She had returned what was not hers, but now the question burned in her chest. What would he do with her? The guards stood tense, their fury barely contained. One muttered under his breath, "End this now." "Show her place," another whispered. "The crowd will forget in a day." But the human diplomat heard them, his sharp gaze flicking their way, silencing them without a single word. Slowly he lowered himself, his tall figure bending down until his eyes met the girl's. The crowd gasped at the sight. A human, a diplomat kneeling before a homeless alien child. No ruler had ever lowered themselves like that. Not in Vela Prime, not in 100 years. The girl's knees shook, her heart nearly stopping as his voice came low and steady. "You had the chance to keep this," he said, holding the wallet between them. "You could have eaten, you could have run. No one would have stopped you." Her lips parted, but no words came, only a broken whisper. I couldn't, it was not mine." The diplomat studied her face, her trembling hands, her hollow eyes, and then, to the shock of all, he placed the wallet back inside his cloak and extended his other hand toward her. "Then it belongs to me to return something as well," he said. His voice was steady, yet carried the weight of command. The girl blinked, confused, her small hands clutching the torn cloth at her side. She did not understand what could he possibly return to her. He looked at her with eyes that held something she had never seen before. Recognition, yes, but also a quiet respect. "You gave me honesty," he said, his words rising louder now so the crowd could hear. "And in return, I give you this. You will not walk these streets alone again." Gasps rippled through the square. The crowd erupted into chaos. Voices clashing, some shouted, "Madness!" "She is nothing," others cried. "He speaks truth." "She deserves more." The guards shifted uneasily, their authority crumbling under his words. The girl's breath caught, her chest tightening with fear and disbelief. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. I don't belong beside you," her voice broke, her hands trembling as if the offer itself was too heavy to hold. But the human did not move his hand away. "You belong where your courage places you," he replied, calm and unyielding. "You proved what no council vote and no royal seal could prove. Honor, in its purest form." The crowd fell into a stunned silence. Every word he spoke cut through them, like a blade of truth too sharp to ignore. Even those who had mocked her now stared, uncertain, shaken. For in that moment, a line had been drawn, not between power and weakness, but between honesty and greed. The girl's tears finally fell. Hot against her cold cheeks, no one had ever spoken for her. No one had ever seen her as anything but trash. And now, in front of the galaxy, a human diplomat declared her worthy. Her small hand rose, hesitant, trembling, until it rested lightly against his. The square erupted again, some cheering, others screaming in outrage. The guards stepped forward, their voices sharp. "You cannot do this. She is nothing. She is filth. The council will not allow it." But the diplomat rose to his full height, his hand still holding the girl's, and his voice thundered above them all. "Then let the council hear me. Let the galaxy hear me. This girl is under my protection." The words struck like fire. The guards fell silent, their faces pale beneath their helmets. The crowd surged with shouts, some in rage, some in awe, and the girl, overwhelmed, could only cling to his hand as though it were the only anchor left in the storm. She did not know what the future held, but in that moment, one truth echoed louder than all the voices around her. Her choice had changed everything, and his reaction had shocked not just the market, not just Vela Prime, but the galaxy itself. The shockwave, the diplomat's words, did not stop at the edge of the marketplace. They traveled like fire, carried from one mouth to another, spreading through the streets of Vela Prime. By the time the sun crystals rose over the towers the next morning, every corner of the city already knew the story. A homeless girl returned the wallet of a human diplomat, they whispered. She could have stolen everything, but she gave it back, and he declared her under his protection. In taverns and markets, in the high halls of trade, the tale was repeated with wonder, disbelief, and fear. Some spoke of her as a symbol of hope, proof that dignity could rise from even the darkest alleys. Others spat the words like poison, calling it weakness, calling it manipulation. But no matter what they believed, no one could ignore it. The guards who had once mocked her now felt the sting of shame. They remembered how the diplomat had stood between them and the girl, how his voice had silenced their cruelty, and though they whispered their anger in private, none dared touch her now, for she was no longer invisible. She was under protection that even their blades could not pierce. The girl herself wandered in a haze. She was given food for the first time in days. Real food, not scraps or rotten peelings. Her stomach ached with the sudden fullness, her body weak from the shock of kindness. She sat in silence in the small chamber the diplomat had offered, unsure if she was allowed to touch anything, unsure if it was all a dream. The memory of the crowd's roar haunted her, the voices of disbelief, of rage, of awe. She had been a shadow once, unseen, unwanted, and now the galaxy's eyes were turning her way. It was terrifying, and yet deep inside, a small flame of something new flickered. Hope. News spread far beyond Vela Prime. In the council chambers of distant worlds, the story was debated with fury. Some leaders sneered. A street rat elevated by chance, it means nothing. Others warned. Be careful, symbols are dangerous. Once the people believe, nothing can stop them. And in the quiet corners of the galaxy, where common folk struggled under the weight of rulers, the story burned brighter than law. They spoke of her as the street child of honor, a nameless girl who had chosen truth over hunger, a girl who had reminded the galaxy that dignity was not bought with wealth. Songs began to form. Whispers turned to chants, and soon, she was no longer just a girl. She was an idea. The diplomat knew this storm could not be contained. He watched from his chambers as envoys arrived, each one demanding answers. Why did you protect her? They asked. What does she mean to you? What game are you playing? But his answers were always the same, calm and unshaken. She is not a game. She is proof. The girl, however, struggled to understand. She sat alone at night, staring at her hands, still dirty even after washing. Why her? Why had her single act of honesty created such fire? She was no leader, no warrior, no scholar. She was just a hungry child who could not take what was not hers. Yet every day she saw the faces that now turned toward her with awe. Merchants who once kicked her away now bowed their heads in silence. Children whispered her name even though she had none, and strangers left food near her door, afraid to approach but desperate to honor her. The pressure grew heavy. She had not asked for this. Yet the galaxy had chosen her. Every whisper, every song, every debate in the council halls pushed her farther from the shadows she once knew, and deeper into a storm she did not understand. One night, she asked the diplomat in a trembling voice, Why? Why me? I am nothing. He looked at her for a long time, his eyes calm, his tone steady. You are nothing to those who chose not to see you, he said. But you are everything to those who need a reminder that hope can come from anywhere. His words settled in her chest like fire and stone. It was terrifying, it was overwhelming, but it was also true. The girl realized she could no longer run back to the alleys. The shadows had released her and the light had claimed her. The shockwave of her choice had spread across the galaxy. It had shaken rulers, inspired the poor, and forced the powerful to face a truth they wished to ignore. And though she did not yet know what path lay ahead, one thing was certain. She was no longer just a nameless child of the streets. She was the spark of a storm that had only begun. The legacy. The days after the storm of whispers turned into weeks, and the weeks began to shape themselves into something larger than the girl could understand. Her life, once measured by scraps of food and corners of alleys, now carried the weight of voices across the stars. She walked beside the diplomat now, though always with her head bowed. The stares of thousands pressed against her wherever she went, some full of awe, others burning with anger. Yet no one dared strike her, no one dared spit or kick, for the human's words still echoed over the galaxy. She walks under my protection. At first, she thought it was only protection, a passing kindness, but slowly, she realized it was something more. Her presence had become a mirror, reflecting truths the powerful could not escape. If a homeless child of the streets could act with honor, what excuse did rulers have when they did not? In council halls, her name, or rather the name given to her, for she still carried none of her own, rose in debate. The street child of honor, they called her to some. She was proof that humans valued truth above power. To others, she was a dangerous flame that would inspire rebellion among the poor. But to all, She had become impossible to ignore. The diplomat himself remained steady. He did not seek to turn her into a weapon or a tool. He simply walked with her, fed her, clothed her, and when asked, always answered the same. She is proof that worth is not measured by wealth or blood. At night, in the quiet chambers far from the noise, the girl would sit by the window. She watched the lights of the city, the ships rising into the stars, and she wondered if she would ever feel like she belonged in this new world. The weight of so many voices was heavy, yet when she closed her eyes, she remembered the moment in the marketplace, the choice, the trembling hands, the human steady gaze, and she reminded herself this had begun not with power, but with truth. The galaxy shifted slowly, but it shifted. Merchants began leaving food for the homeless. Afraid of being compared to the girl, guards once quick to strike, now thought twice before dragging a beggar into the drains. And in distant colonies, children whispered her story as a bedtime tale. Return what is not yours even when you are hungry, for honor is worth more than gold. The girl herself did not claim these changes. She still moved quietly, still spoke little. She still carried the shyness of someone who had lived unseen for too long. But everywhere she went, the world bent slightly around her. Not because she demanded it, but because the galaxy had already decided she was more than herself. One evening, the diplomat placed a cloak around her shoulders. It was not woven from silk nor embroidered with gold. It was simple but strong, the kind worn by those who stood in service rather than luxury. He spoke softly. A cloak does not make you noble, but it will remind them you are no longer forgotten. Her eyes burned with tears she tried to hide, for she had never owned anything that was truly hers until now. As years passed, the story did not fade. It grew, whispered into history, told and retold until it became larger than the girl herself. Some called it a legend, others swore it was true. But those who had stood in the market that night remembered clearly. They remembered the trembling girl, the glowing wallet, and the human who chose to kneel. Her legacy was not in riches nor in crowns. It was in the spark she had carried into a galaxy that had forgotten the poor, a reminder that greatness could rise from hunger, from shadows, from the very places the powerful had abandoned. The girl, who once thought she had no name, no family, no future, became the symbol of a truth too strong to bury. And though she still walked softly, though she still spoke little, her every step now echoed with the weight of a galaxy that had been changed forever. In the end, the diplomat's words proved true. She was no longer invisible. She was the spark that turned silence into fire, the legacy of a homeless alien child, whose single choice had stunned the galaxy, and whose story would never be forgotten.